Good morning, everyone. I'm Bronwyn Maddox, Director of Chatham House, and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for coming. I'm delighted to have here His Royal Highness, Prince Turki AlFaisal, who needs very little introduction and has one of these simple, powerful resumes, if you like, more than 20 years, as you know, running Saudi Arabia's foreign intelligence, and then in 2001, that year, over-resonant because of 9/11, became the ambassador here in the UK, with all the intensity of those particular times, and then followed that with being the ambassador to the US, again in very, very turbulent times, and is now the chairman and I think founder of the King Faisal,
one of the founders, the
King Faisal Institute on Research and Islamic Studies. And he said to us elegantly, he is here not to speak for the Saudi government, but to give his own views from that long perspective on the many questions that we might ask. We apologize for keeping you waiting, and we'll go the same number of minutes over the top of the hour as we are now, that is 6 or 7. And for the avoidance of any doubt, we are on the record and this is being live streamed. So, a second welcome. Welcome to Chatham House. Let us start with one of the questions that I think is on everyone's mind, and that is Gaza and the possibility, or otherwise, of any kind of deal that is going to bring some peace there. What is your view?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for your invitation and for your presence. In Arabic folklore, sitting in a chair like this, we would say, this is kursi al-i'tiraf, which means the chair of confession. So I'm not here to confess anything, but as Her Excellency said, I speak for myself. I'm not a representative of the Saudi government. But on issues of Gaza and other things that affect our part of the world, I do not hesitate to express what I know and what I hear from others, whether through the media or through official statements. I wish I had positive things to say about what can be done in Gaza. Unfortunately, I am not one of those who believes that we're going to end this conflict soon. And I don't see any particular reason why I should change my mind at this moment. Because the world in general is not coming forward to put the right pressure and the right tactics and the right policies to end the conflict. I think if it were simply a matter of a quid pro quo, a geostrategic exchange of interests between the Palestinians and the Israelis, I think that would be much easier to engage in and to be hopeful about. But it is not just that. It's a matter of history, and I'm reminded that this country particularly has a special responsibility for what is happening in Palestine, starting with what I would consider to be the ill-begotten Balfour Declaration in 1917, and going on throughout the past years to reach where we are today. My principal concern, not just as a Saudi, but as a human being, is to see that the killing stops on both sides. And that's why I'm not too hopeful, because I think those who are responsible for the killing are not yet convinced that stopping the killing is going to serve their purposes, whether it is on the Israeli side or on the Hamas side. Continuing the war seems to be playing into the hands of those who don't want to stop it. Mr. Netanyahu has declared objectives in his campaign against Hamas. He has not achieved them, although it's been almost a year since he started pummeling Hamas with bombs and rockets and other destructive materials. And on the other side, Hamas declared intentions and objectives of their campaign, which they have not accomplished. So both sides are in that state of mutual destructive mode that nobody on the outside can force them to change. We've seen UN resolutions pass. We've seen diplomatic missions going forward and backwards. We've seen public statements from various heads of state, from NGOs, from United Nations officials, and yet nobody has been able, as it were, to put the screw on both sides to stop the killing. If anybody has another view, I'd be very happy to listen to what they have to say. But if I may, I would like to suggest that perhaps there could be a way of putting the screw on both sides. It will have to come.
And this is exactly the point I wanted to develop. So do you think that either the US in pressure on Israel or other countries in pressure on Hamas can do more at this point to give them a reason to address the question of peace?
Very much so. I think the United States has enormous tools to affect Israel, which it is not using. Not just simply the issue of denial of supply of weapons and material to the Israelis, but also using its, if you like, standing in the world to tell Mr. Netanyahu, you have to do this, and he will have to do it. On the Hamas side, I think the pressure on them is going to have to come from the people in Gaza, unfortunately. They are the only ones, I think, who can put a stop to the Hamas intentions of keeping the war going. I don't think either Egypt or Qatar or any other country can force Hamas or put a screw on Hamas to make it stop. But definitely, I think the people in Gaza not only have a right to do that, but they will eventually have to do it. And more than 50,000 dead. That is what makes me so angry that not just Hamas, but the whole world is accepting these figures and not putting the screws, as it were, on particularly Israel to stop the fighting.
Okay, let's just pick up that point. The whole world is watching. And as you know, there have been many, many protests, including repeatedly in London about the death in Gaza. Also ones are in support of Israel. But let's just stick with this point of the US and the pressure that it might put on Benjamin Netanyahu. We had Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, here at Chatham House this week. It was under the rule, so I'm not going to break that confidence, but let me say what he said was compatible with what he said in public, which was that the US has very, very tough conversations with Netanyahu. Do you think the US, how exactly would you like the US to be tougher with Israel?
As I mentioned, the tools available to the United States is not only denial of export of weapons and material, but a lot of financial help goes to Israel from the United States. If some of the privileges that Israeli lobby, for example, in America enjoys of tax-free contributions to Israel can be withdrawn from those Israeli lobbyists, that will be great pressure on Israel. As you know, in the United States, you have to register as a lobbyist for a specific country or be prosecuted if you want to talk for that country. But a lot of organizations in America do that for Israel and still enjoy a tax-free status because they are considered not representing Israel as per se, but simply as philanthropic or humanitarian groupings. That is one tool, I think, that can be used by the United States to put pressure on Israel. As I said, denial of weapons and intelligence and other support, military and security, will also put pressure on Israel. So there are many tools that are available to the United States, not simply harsh talk, which seems to have gotten us nowhere. But is America ready to do that? As I said, I'm not too optimistic about that.
What about the other side of, you talk about the people of Gaza, it being necessary for them to turn on Hamas in some way and say, look, we want peace. And yet people you're talking about are obviously they've been moving home, they've suffered enormous casualties. Is it realistic that they, in some concerted way, can turn on Hamas, which still is what remains of an administration of Gaza?
I think if the people of Gaza see some sign of hope for an ending to the fighting, they will start putting pressure on Hamas to stop their practice as it is now. But the people in Gaza are not seeing any movement forward. As I said, the world seems to be accepting that the war is going to continue. And so having a reason to look forward to an end to the war by whoever is being moved from one place of encampment in Gaza to another place, they're basically now engaged in not only protecting themselves from the rain of weapons on them and bombs, but also finding sustenance, whether it is food or water or medicine for themselves and for their children. So their ability to influence Hamas, I think, is much curtailed by what is happening around the world and the fact that Israel is given this free license by the world to continue its campaign.
So I think a lot of people would agree with the picture that you've laid out, that at the moment the Israeli government certainly and Palestinian people are not putting pressure, are not moving towards some kind of deal. Let's turn to Saudi Arabia as to what it might be able to do to influence this, if not resolve it. Saudi Arabia has made clear that it would like normalization with Israel. Your ambassador, who was here, said at our London conference in the summer, look, we want normalization, but it depends on there being a credible path to peace and to land for the Palestinians, and it depends on an end to the killing in Gaza. And he added, and then we would love Israel to be part of football matches, to be part of singing contests and everything in our part of the world, not just Europe. And it was a marvelous vision of what might come, and yet, up against the reality you've described. Does Saudi Arabia have any influence on this?
The kingdom has taken a very important role in providing support for reaching a peaceful resolution, not just to the issue happening in Gaza today, but also to the overall peace between Israel and the rest of the Arab world. and the Palestinians in particular, not just through its proposals for peace, whether the 1981 King Fahd proposal, many of you probably don't remember it, or perhaps those of you have not yet been born at that time when he made it, which was the first time that the Arab world talked about peace with Israel publicly. And all Arab countries supported it at that time, followed by the King Abdullah Peace Initiative in 2002, which now has been accepted by all of the world, except two countries, Israel and Iran. In the recent conflict between Gaza and the Israelis, the kingdom led the Muslim world in not only summits with the Arabs, but with the Muslim world, and also the diplomatic missions that have been taking place to convince the world that there must be an end to the fighting, led by the Saudi foreign minister, who visited capitals of the world to convince them of supporting an end to the war. In terms of public statements, of course, the kingdom has been in the forefront of condemning the Israeli onslaught on the Palestinians, not just in Gaza, but equally in the West Bank. And let's not forget, there is another front to the Gaza front, which is the West Bank, where Israel is also having a free-for-all in attacking Palestinians. So the kingdom has been very active in its role as a supporter of an end to the fighting. As far as normalization with Israel, the kingdom has been talking to the United States about a relationship based on firmer ties between the kingdom and the United States, as far as not just security, but economic development and other engagement with the United States. And the United States wanting to have normalization with Israel. The kingdom replied to that publicly has been, if there is a Palestinian state that Israel accepts to come to existence, then we can talk about normalization with Israel. And I remember before October 7th, those talks not only progressed along those lines, but also the kingdom invited a Palestinian delegation to come and talk directly to the Americans about what it is that might bring about a Palestinian state. I'm not privy to those talks, so I don't know what happened between the Palestinians and the Americans. But the kingdom's position has always been, we will not speak for the Palestinians. They have to do it for themselves. And unfortunately, of course, October 7th put an end to those talks. But nonetheless, both sides, the Saudi side and the American side, have publicly expressed that they want the talks to continue. And whether it is on a bilateral basis, US-Saudi linkage and so on, and some sort of agreement on, as I said, security and economic and other issues, but also the establishment of a Palestinian state, and then normalization with, between Israel, not just Saudi Arabia, but the rest of the Islamic world. That's my knowledge of it.
Yes. Is it possible for some of those talks between Saudi Arabia and the US to progress even while there is no progress on the Palestinian question?
As far as I can see, there hasn't been any progress on that point. Yeah. And all the public statements I've seen from Saudi officials indicate that the need for the establishment of a Palestinian state is a primary condition for Saudi Arabia to have normalization with Israel. But also on the Israeli side, the whole government is saying no Palestinian state. So how can there be normalization between us and them with those positions in place?
We have observed often at Chatham House that many countries are talking with hope possibly about a two-state solution or about land for the Palestinians, but the Israelis are not, many of them, not among that, and not many Palestinians. Let me ask you, it is often said since October 7th that Hamas did this attack partly, at least, for the reason of stopping normalization. Do you think that's true?
I don't, because for Hamas to have done what it did, it would have required to prepare for it, in my view, at least a couple of years, to gather the human and material resources to launch a campaign like that. And that definitely, those couple of years preceded the talks between us and the Americans about the establishment of a Palestinian state and normalization with Israel. So if that Hamas had that intention, it would have had to do it much before. No, I don't think that that was one of the reasons why Hamas did what it did. Although I'm sure they consider that this was an added benefit to their campaign, that they affected this intention to reach an accommodation between America and Saudi Arabia.
Let's turn to the wider region. I'm sure there is going to be a lot about Israel and Gaza and so on in questions, and I will come to questions about halfway through, which is approaching. But the wider region, it's coming up for 2 years since Saudi Arabia and Iran had a kind of rapprochement brokered by China. What difference has that made?
Not being in government circles, I don't know what is happening between the two governments, but seeing it from the outside, the difference that I see is that the leadership in both countries now are talking to each other. Before the previous president, Raisi, died, he attended the Islamic Summit Conference in Riyadh, which was called by Saudi Arabia to support the Palestinian people. And it seemed at the time that the final statement that came out stressed the need for a two-state solution, which Iran has always been wary of declaring its acceptance of it. And that passed through while he was present. Subsequently, of course, they reneged a bit on that and said that, we still have reservations about that. But since the new president came about, which is only, I think, a month or two since his election, I don't know what has happened between the leadership. So that's one aspect of the difference between now and the agreement that we reach with them in Beijing. The other thing, of course, is the presence and the increase of the number of Iranian pilgrims to come to Saudi Arabia on the annual Hajj. This, of course, in my view, has a more people-to-people aspect, in that all these pilgrims who come to Saudi Arabia will see what Saudi Arabia has become and use that as comparison with what they have to live through in Iran. And I think that will have a potential impact on the Iranian people as to where they could be, as to where they are. But that still will take some time.
It's a really interesting point, though.
Yeah. Other than that, I have not yet seen any particular change in, for example, Iranian efforts to interfere in the affairs of Arab states, which would have been part of the agreement that was held between them and Saudi Arabia in Beijing. Whether it is in Palestine, Hamas, of course, receives a lot of support from Iran, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, and the Houthis now hold the world as hostage, if you like, in the Bab el-Mandeb Red Sea entrance. And yet Iran is not showing that it can do something there if it wanted to. And I think the kingdom would have expected that Iran would be more forthcoming in showing, not just to us, but to others, that they can be a positive factor in bringing stability and removing differences, not just with Saudi Arabia, but with the rest of us.
This is exactly where I was going to go with the next question, because what the Houthis are doing is, as you said, it's holding the world hostage. It is not very helpful to the kingdom. Do you think Iran can't control the Houthis or doesn't want to?
I wish I could tell you. If they can control the Houthis, they're definitely not doing that. And if they can't control the Houthis, well then, we're all in a bit of trouble there. But if I might say so, Yani, we can tell you here in this country and in other countries, we told you so about the Houthis when we were supporting and still support the legitimate government in Sana'a to resist the Houthi aggression that took place, started in 2014, and the civil war that succeeded that between them and the government. But the kingdom tried to talk to the Houthis and still does, I think, engage with them, as I see in public statements and other means of communication. But no one is has had the ability to really predict what the Houthis will or will not do. So I think there is something for the world community also to put pressure on the Houthis as well.
Now, there were US, UK airstrikes against the Houthis. The kingdom chose not to take part. Why was that?
Well, because we are engaged with them. And if we took military means to bomb them now, that engagement would stop. And it will have a negative effect on achieving peace between the Houthis and the legitimate government. I think the world, in these pinprick bombings that they have over Houthi positions in Yemen, can do more. And definitely, we've seen the deployment of European and American fleets along the Red Sea and Arabian Sea coasts. I think more can be done there to interdict the supply of weaponry that comes to the Houthis from Iran, which is not happening. And putting pressure on Iran by the world community there, I think can have a positive impact on what the Houthis can or will and are able to do in launching these missiles and drones to hit international commerce in the waters of the Bab el-Mandeb.
Where is Syria in all this? It's not in the headlines, British, even American press at the moment, but the problems there have not gone away.
The what?
The problems in Syria have not gone away.
With?
Syria.
Syria?
Yes.
No, sure.
Do you see it as stable at the moment or another source of instability in this picture?
Looking at it from the outside, of course, and depending on media and official statements, for my source of information on Syria, it is still a work in progress. Not only the kingdom, but other countries in the Arab world reached an accommodation of some sort with the Syrian regime, with certain, I would say, expectations from that regime on issues not just of the export of drugs from Syria to the rest of the area, but also on the conduct of the Syrian government towards not only its own people, but also towards the relationship that it has with the various militias that affect us all, particularly Hezbollah. And I have not seen any positive progress from the Syrian government vis-à-vis those items. So if there is something that is happening between governments that I don't know about, I don't know. So all I can say is that there's still more to be done by the regime to meet the expectations of those of the countries that achieved the rapprochement with the government.
Let's leave that there. We might come on to Syria a bit more in questions, where, of course, the kingdom normalized ties back in 2023. But let's leave that one there. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and there are some good ones already online, and please do keep them coming, including at least one brave solution to the problems in Gaza. Thank you. All right, might get to that. Who would like to start? Could we have the lights up, please? Great. I'll take them one at a time. And so here, I think you had the first hand up, yes? But please wait for the microphone. You can stay where you are, but please wait for the microphone. Great. And please, could you say who you are?
I'm hard of hearing, so if you raise your voice.
Okay, I'll shout. I'm an author and a journalist by profession. And thank you very much, Your Highness, about your highly polished diplomatic talk. Now, my question is, as the genocide in Gaza and the settlers' violence in the West Bank rages on, the entire Islamic countries are aghast. They are aghast at the silence of the regional Arab states who are not helping the Palestinians, but they are confusing the whole world. And why don't you come to the rescue of the Palestinians for your kith and kins? Your brothers and sisters are being slaughtered every day, and how long are you going to tolerate this everyday slaughter of the innocent people? Thank you very much.
Want me to answer or take some more questions?
One. I'll answer that.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned to you, the kingdom has been doing what it can to bring a stop to the end of the fighting. In terms of if you're asking Saudi Arabia to use military means to engage in warfare with Israel, that is definitely something I can say as a Saudi, and I think not just Saudis but other in the area would not like to see happen. We don't want the fighting to be spread wider between peoples of different countries in the area. Rather, we want to contain it and end it. And I think the things that Saudi Arabia has been doing has been affecting, for example, the position of various countries in the world who, when the first events of October 7th came about, came all out in support of Israel and subsequently have backed off a little bit. Example of that, the United Kingdom. The change of government here has led to a change in policy as far as supplying, for example, Israel with weapons. I'd like to see more done by the United Kingdom. I think, for example, the United Kingdom, I think, should recognize the state of Palestine. It's long overdue. It's been passed, I think, in a previous parliament has a resolution that asking the UK government to recognize the state of Palestine, which they have not yet done. So hopefully this government will be able to move forward and not simply be a little reticent or shy about what it does with Israel and Israel's activities not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank. But I don't think Saudi Arabia will be willing to widen the conflict into a bigger military conflict than it is happening today. We'd rather see the fighting end than widen it.
Thank you. Let's go right to the back. There's a whole cluster of hands there. I'm going to ask my colleagues to pick one.
My name is David Luben. I'm a research fellow here at Chatham House. Earlier this year, it seemed likely that Saudi Arabia was going to join the BRICS group. It didn't in the end, and I wonder whether you think Saudi Arabia will join the BRICS grouping and how it fits in to Saudi Arabia's relationship with China in general.
Thank you, and thank you, Gerson from Buka Online, for asking that question as well.
I don't know. What I see of statements is that Saudi Arabia and other countries have been, I think, either invited or have applied to be members of the BRICS group. But so far, none of them have yet fully become members of the group. What holds them up, I really don't know. But I just saw a statement by the Brazilian foreign minister. I think he was on a visit to Saudi Arabia, saying that BRICS is going to become a group of something like 35 countries. When that happens, I don't know, but I don't know about Saudi Arabia. I wish I could tell you, but I don't know.
Okay, great. Can we keep going at the back here? I'm going to ask my colleagues to, but there's a woman in the middle.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness, for your very excellent talk and for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to answer my question in advance. You very rightly
Will
point
you forgive
out...
me? Would you like to say who you are?
Oh, my apologies. My name is Lydia Ellis. You very rightly point out in your talk that the United Kingdom has a particular responsibility to Palestine and to the Palestinians. And you also point out that, regrettably, so far, the United States, Qatar, and Egypt have not been very successful in trying to negotiate a peace agreement or an end to the conflict. So I wonder, what is the particular role that the United Kingdom might play at this point when you mention the special responsibility that the UK has to the Palestinian people? For example, would it be at all beneficial if the UK were to join the peace talks with Arab and American allies, or would that be futile? What occurs to you? Thank you very much.
I would like to see the United Kingdom, as I mentioned, not only recognize Palestine as a state, but perhaps also take some of the actions that I would recommend for the United States, which is cutting back the supply of weaponry and other support to Israel. I think that would be a very important step in forcing Mr. Netanyahu or whoever succeeds him in Israel to be more forthcoming on the two-state solution. These are steps, I think, that can be taken by the United Kingdom.
Thank you. Okay, again in the middle. People were very, very quick in the middle to get their hands up.
My name is Mohammed Al-Mail from Kuwait, and I am an independent researcher. I have 2 points. The first point is, why do you portray the scene as a war between Israel and Hamas and not between Israel and Palestinian people? And the second point is, we may appreciate your father, King Faisal's strong position against Israel, but what do you have to say for the current government shameful behavior today? Are you not deeply ashamed that instead of taking stand for justice. You prioritize the political maneuvering. This is not just a failure. This is a disgrace for the Arab world. So how can you justify this betrayal
That's
to
now three
those
questions.
Yeah,
to those who?
Yeah,
I have a
and
question. So my
Mohammed,
question is.
forgive me. I normally impose a rule of one question. You've managed to.
So the first question was
yeah.
why you don't consider it as a war between the Palestinian and Israel, and you consider it as it's between Hamas and Israel. The second question is when you will stop hiding behind
we've had that one.
rhetoric.
All right, thank you. About the position
on
of
the issue
the
of war
government.
between Gaza and as I mentioned, the Israeli onslaught is not just on Gaza. It's also on the West Bank. If the terminology comes out as being a war between Gaza and or Hamas and Israel, it's because this is what is being mentioned in the media and in other statements by other people. But definitely my consideration is that Israel's occupation of Palestine is inclusive, not just of Gaza, but also the West Bank. And all of the destruction and mayhem that Israel has been causing is not confined to Gaza. But as I mentioned, it is also being done in the West Bank. So I really don't differentiate between the two. If you want to interpret it in one way, that is your option.
Okay, woman over by the door.
Thank you, Your Royal. Is it working? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. My name is Farah from SRMG Think. Is there prospect of normalization is dead? What do you think?
Is normalization dead?
Is what?
Normalization. Is the prospect dead?
Well, you tell me. If you have an Israeli government that says, I'm not going to recognize a Palestinian state, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, there's no normalization. That's been public. It's been stated many times at the highest levels. And our ambassador here has said it on many occasions. So that's where it stands.
2 rows in front of you at the edge.
Thank you. Kashish Parpiani from Reliance Industries India. Your Royal Highness, thank you so much for speaking on such a varied range of issues. I'd like to get your views on the prospect of economic integration within the region and beyond. As you may know, 1 month before October 7, countries from across Middle East and Europe came together with India to announce the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. How do you see that prospect now?
It's a work in progress. And it's going to take, I think, many years before it can be achieved. The agreement in principle has been done during the G20 meeting in India, but the details of that will have to be worked out. And the corridor, in my view, and in what I see written about it, is that it's going to be inclusive, not exclusive. And the channel of trade and commerce coming from the east through the Arabian Peninsula will be inclusive of all of the countries and not simply 1 or 2 countries in the area. So wherever business initiative and entrepreneurship can take that commerce through trade and so on, it will be supported by the Saudi government.
Okay, thank you. There's one here on the side, and then I am coming to, there's a couple right at the back. Been very patient. Here on the side.
Thank you, Damian Melrose from the national newspaper. You've talked about Iran quite a bit. I wondered if you could talk about Russia in that context as well. We're getting briefings, for example, from the Americans about Iranian missiles going to Ukraine, and whether you think there is any potential of a linkage between the current conflict we have in the Middle East to that other conflict in Europe as a result of the Iranian-Russian relationship.
So this is a question about the role of Russia and relations between Russia and Iran, and is there any connection between the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict between Israel and the Palestine?
Everything nowadays is tied to each other. And you really can't tell which came first, the chicken or the egg, in this context. They're all linked. Yeah, Iran's position in the Ukraine and its support for Russia is, I think, for the Iranians, as part of their not only willingness but ability to come out of the sanctions and other measures that America and Europe has taken against Iran. And of course, because of Russia's particular relationship with Iran, I think the Iranians feel that they must come through and help their friends, the Russians who have stood with them in these sanctions issues and were party to the nuclear agreement of 2015. Definitely in the geostrategic composition of world affairs, the influence of that situation on what's happening in our part of the world is that it is identifying Iran and Russia as being in one position in that geostrategic composition of world affairs. And on the opposite side, of course, what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank and Israel is also showing how far the Iranians can be a player in both that sphere and the Ukrainian sphere. So from Iranian perspective, I think they want to show the rest of us that they are capable of doing things in multiple areas, not just in one area.
Thank you. Right at the back, in the white shirt.
Thank you very much. Hi, hello.
Hello.
How should I call you? Royal Highness Prince Turki AlFaisal bin Abdulaziz. My name is Human. I'm a PhD researcher on financial crime with focus on Russia, Iran, and China. So how do you view the impact of Turkey and Qatar on Hamas strategies in Gaza? Thank you.
I have not seen yet any effect of either Turkey or Qatar on making Hamas forthcoming on certain issues in the talks. What I read in the papers is that at certain times Hamas have come out and said, yes, we agree to certain things. And then as a result of that, Netanyahu changes the rules of that accord or potential accord. And so Hamas has to take a position of saying, no, I do not accept what the Israelis want. So it's a matter of each side wanting to better the other and using whatever support they get from others. Israel, of course, gets support from the United States and European countries, and Hamas gets support from Turkey, from Iran, and from Qatar. They change their positions. But I have not seen yet that either Turkey or Qatar can, as between quotation marks, deliver Hamas to some agreement. And it's tied to what happens on the other side as well.
Thank you. I'm going to take one online from Mariam Moad, and she's saying, I'm going to paraphrase, I'm sorry, what would Saudi Arabia consider an independent Palestinian state to be?
It is what the Arab Peace Initiative has stated. It's a state on the land of Palestine in the 1967 border of that time, inclusive of Jerusalem and all other parts of that territory, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank. That is not just a Saudi position, but that is a position of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is the only legitimate representative of the Palestinian people according not only to its constitution, but also according to Hamas declaring that the PLO speaks for the Palestinians. So it is not a uniquely Saudi position, but it is an Arab, and I think it is a world position as well.
Here, Sanam Vakil, who is director of our Middle East and North Africa program.
Good morning, Your Royal Highness. Thank you for being here with us. We're so glad to have you.
You had your say in our prayer.
I wanted to ask you about something different than we talked about earlier, if I may.
Yes.
About Afghanistan, where you have years of experience working on, you've written about in your book. And we've seen just recently the UAE reach out and move forward in their relationship with the Taliban. And I know you have said today that you're here in an informal capacity, but certainly the government is looking to you for advice on Afghanistan. And what are you advising them? Is it time to restore diplomatic ties and engage with the Taliban? Keen to hear your views there.
Thank you. And Nicole Pisha online has also asked, what does Saudi Arabia feel about the Taliban? Do you have concerns about the Taliban rule?
I'm not telling you a secret that my government does not consult with me, not just on Afghanistan, but on other issues. However, that does not prevent me from saying what I know and hear from their side what they say about their relationship. The government has already said that it will work through the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to provide humanitarian aid to the Afghan people. If there is more than that, I'm not aware of. But my view is, unless and until the Taliban come forward to implement what they promised that they would do when they became the responsible leadership in Afghanistan, that is the limit of what the kingdom should do with them, which is provide humanitarian aid through aid agencies and other non-governmental institutions. We have seen, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, a regression on the part of their leadership on what they had publicly declared they would do in Afghanistan. So it is up to them to change their position. I think before Saudi Arabia should engage with them, like the UAE is choosing to do that.
Okay. There are several questions online just following that of whether Saudi Arabia is concerned about the Taliban's treatment of women.
Yes, indeed. And I think there is no question, not just the treatment of women, but treatment of other opposition or non-Taliban groups in Afghanistan. The kingdom hopefully will be able to engage with others to convince the Taliban that they should be an inclusive representative of the Afghan people, as they promised that they would be when they took over in Kabul. They haven't done that. Yeah. So unless and until they do that, I think the kingdom will remain where it is today.
Taliban and inclusive are not words you often get in the same sentence. Not at the moment. At the back with the green lanyard. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Rayhanuddin. I'm from Middle East Eye. There's been a widespread crackdown on displays of solidarity with Palestinians in Saudi Arabia. We've reported on people being detained for calling for a boycott of certain goods and others being arrested for wearing kafirs. On other issues beyond Palestine, Salman al-Oda has been jailed for a long time for rather innocuous comments about relations with Qatar. Salma al-Shahab, a mother of two, was also jailed for innocuous tweets. You're speaking very freely today. Will there ever be a time when ordinary Saudis can do the same about Palestine and about anything?
He's asking about the crackdown within Saudi Arabia on expressions of support for Palestine and crackdowns on the freedom to speak generally in Saudi Arabia.
Well, I haven't felt myself any restriction on my expressions of support for Palestine in Saudi Arabia. Nor have I seen any particular reporting on that, except perhaps in some publications that are not friendly to Saudi Arabia. But what I see of the Saudi press, whether written or on television or in the social media, is full support for Palestine and no restriction on expressing support for Palestinians. And the other one was on the...
No, that was the...
Was that it?
That was it.
Okay.
I'm going to take... just a couple of minutes more. I'm going to take 2, maybe 3 together, right in the middle, and then the woman 3 on from you. Yes. All right. No, great. I'll take the 3 of you, please.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much, Your Highness, Your Royal Highness. Iran's increasing influence in the region has recently been sort of solidified with the agreement or the connection with Sudan. They've established the relationship after 8 years of no diplomatic relationship and started on a strong footing. How do you perceive Saudi Arabia's role going forward in Sudan specifically and in the region to stabilize the region and, for lack of a better word, curb the Iranian influence within the region? Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to say who you are?
Sorry, Amira Mustafa, Minara Analytics.
Thank you. Let's take that one from Iran Analytics. Iran has solidified its relationship with Sudan. How do you see Saudi Arabia's role, perhaps in countering that, are you suggesting, and in helping stabilize the region?
Well, the kingdom has been leading the efforts to stop the fighting in the Sudan. As you know, both sides had been invited to the kingdom to have discussions on ending the fighting there since it started. And I think those efforts are continuing. I don't know if there is a specific aim of Saudi Arabia, as you said, to diminish or to lessen the Iranian influence in the Sudan. It's up to the Sudanese to decide for themselves who they choose to work with. But the position of the kingdom is that the fighting must stop yesterday, not tomorrow, and that both sides have to sit down and negotiate. And there is what is called the Jeddah Agreement, which was based on the location of where those two sides met in Saudi Arabia. If the conditions of that agreement are put in place, I think that would lead to ending the fighting. And if Iran is taking advantage of the fighting to extend its influence in the Sudan, then ending the fighting in the Sudan will not allow Iran to take advantage of that.
Thank you. And I'm going to take one final one, which is online and something we haven't really touched on directly. And that is from Mehrdad Konsari, asking how much you are concerned about the lack of progress in nuclear talks with Iran, and what are the consequences of Iran getting closer to having nuclear weapons?
Well, I think all of us are concerned about what is happening in Iran and its nuclear ambitions. And unfortunately, since the 2015 agreement between the West and Russia and China and Iran, The situation has gotten worse, not better. What I see reported in the press is that Iran is much closer today in acquiring nuclear capability. They never tell us in the press what capability means, whether it is a nuclear device or a so-called threshold capability. Those are still uncertain words that they don't use in that context. But it's not just the kingdom that is concerned. It's the whole world is concerned about the expansion of nuclear weapons ability in the world. The kingdom's position historically has been that the Middle East should be a zone free of weapons of mass destruction. Since that idea was proposed, ironically, in 1974 by Iran, when the late Shah proposed that there should be a nuclear freeze on developments in the Middle East completely. Subsequently, with the present revolutionary government coming into power, they continue to express their view that they want a zone free of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, but their actions belie their words. So I think it's up to the world to make sure that Iran, not just Iran, but the rest of us in the Middle East, including Israel, should be denied having nuclear and weapons of mass destruction in their arsenals. That's where Saudi Arabia stands, I think, officially.
It does stand there officially, but if the world fails to stop Iran getting nuclear weapons, which is possible, would Saudi Arabia then want nuclear weapons?
Well, God help us. And if Iran, if Iran gets their nuclear weapons, I can't speak of what I believe is going to happen, because I really don't know what the intricacies of the situation is. But my government has publicly stated that, and my leadership has stated, that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, then Saudi Arabia will also seek to acquire similar capability. And that's why we're working very hard, not just with the United States, but also with the United Nations. As you know, every 5 years, I think since 2000 or since 1995, I think, there's been a 5-year, every 5 years, there's a conference held at the United Nations, which is called the Review Conference on the Non-Proliferation Treaty that was signed in 1960, I think, or 62. And in every 5-year cycle, the world gets together in the United States, in the United Nations, to talk about the developments in the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. In 2010, I was party to discussions invited by Australia and Japan to propose a program for the then 2010 review conference in the United Nations, which that proposal stressed the fact that there need to be a zone free of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. And as a matter of fact, I wrote a paper on that for the Harvard Kennedy School some years back. You can look it online. And there are things that can be done to bring about that zone, which would then obviate the need for anybody to have nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Basically, it starts with a United Nations Security Council guarantee that those countries in the Middle East that develop nuclear weapons should be sanctioned. And those sanctions to be included, to include in them even military sanction. And those countries that accept the zone free of weapons of mass destruction will get technical, economic, and other support to develop civil uses for nuclear energy, because nuclear energy is ineffective source of energy for the world. So that condition has not yet been met. And I think in 2012, there was an effort to bring about discussions on a zone free of weapons of mass destruction, which when after many travels of the delegate from the United Nations who was trying to convince the world of establishing the zone free of weapons of mass destruction, alas, the United States withdrew from the talks. Whether they will change their mind now in a new administration, I don't know. But definitely, those 5-year talks that can happen at the United Nations should lead the world to be convinced that not just Iran, but Saudi Arabia and Israel and other countries in the area should not have nuclear weapons. That's where I think I stand, and that's where I think my government stands.
We're going to have to stop there. I'm sorry, there is an almost infinite number of subjects and very large number of hands up, and I'm really sorry for that. We perhaps can regroup after the US election and pick up whole flanks of other questions. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for terrific questions. The same online. Royal Highness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would like to say something?
Just before you leave, you know, the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies in Riyadh, where I work, hosts researchers to do research on any subject that they wish. So if any of you want to apply to be a researcher at the center, please don't hesitate to do that. We're online, King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies, and you can register online and you'll be hosted in the center and provided with the necessary support. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.